So if we're looking at the previous week's charts, I was looking at Euro USD, Euro AUD, and US oil. I'm going to take a look at Euro AUD first, and then I'll look at US oil, and lastly I'll have a look at Euro USD at the end of the video, just to give some insight as to what I'm looking at for this upcoming week. So if we're jumping with Euro AUD, so this trade we were in, by the time I was recording the video last week, I was already holding the trade, right, holding buys. I had 2 entries targeting the highs, right? So the reason behind this trade was we had a break of structure, right? We broke these lows over here. Market pulled back, we had a sweep, and then now we had a push away to the upside, right? So we had that and a push towards the upside. Break of structure, change of character, call it what you want. And then we had a demand area sitting over here. So this doesn't look like a clear demand area when you look at it on the 4-hour time frame. I think it just needs a trained eye to see that there's a demand area sitting on the lower time frames, right? So once we have that, right, we have liquidity resting over below these lows, right? Liquidity sitting over there. We expect a price to break below it and tap into this demand area over here. So to have it more clearly shown, we can see that, okay, there's a nice demand area over there. I didn't put my stop loss below these lows over here because I figured that, okay, probably spread could wick me out, and I decided to make it a bit more extended to these lows over here, right? So we had price tap into that demand area and then push towards the highs over here. First take profit hit, right? And obviously the second one I was targeting the higher highs over here on top, right? We didn't get that reaction. So as I mentioned, I did have 2 trades. The second one I was trailing my stops, right? So the first one gave us a nice 1:3, right? And once we moved into profit immediately, obviously I put my stop loss on break even, and then I started trailing it and I put it over here. I think what I learned from this one is that next time I have a setup or trade running, instead of having the stop loss sitting closer to the entry and when I've had profits, I think I should put it at least 50%, right, or close at least to at a 1:1, right? So that's the only thing I'm changing going forward. And we had a look at US oil. US oil, we were targeting a buy, and it did not happen, as on Monday when we opened we had a huge candle towards the downside. On other charts it shows as a gap. If I do draw out what I saw last week, we had a small break of structure, right? Liquidities, a sweep, right, of liquidity. It's lagging, I don't know why. I had a sweep of liquidity, right? And we made a higher high over here. We had a high. Obviously now we treat this level as liquidity. Expected price to tap into this order block, take us to the supply area, and then push down again. So we did expect to sell, but we expected it from the supply area over here, right? Trump tweeted over the weekend talking about easing tensions and de-escalating the war. So obviously that impacted oil, and that is why we saw the gap down. So now we're actually seeing that the US is no longer becoming a safe haven, right? Obviously when tensions are easing, the sentiments change. It's no longer a risk off sentiments, it's now risk on. So people are more willing now to be free and buy gold and buy other currencies as well, you know. As I did mention previously, that the US is also a safe haven, right, when it comes to energy crisis, right? Yeah, if we're jumping now to what I'm looking for this week, our setups for this week, I'm looking at AUDCAD, right? But before I jump on AUDCAD, sorry, I also had a look at AUD USD last week, right? AUD USD last week had a similar setup to CAD, AUDCAD. So I'm probably going to be watching out for the same setup, a little bit more vigilant, because last week I actually missed the setup because of the hidden demand area over here. So as you can see, I had already marked it out. We had a high and a high low, right? And we had a break of structure over here, right? This was a break of structure. And as we can see with this week, from this week down to this week over here, this is an entire demand area created over here, right? How did I spot this? area as well, like I mentioned previously, sometimes it's hidden within the lower time frames. So I chose this lowest demand area, this point of interest over here, because we had an FEG, inefficiency. I expected price to come down into this area over here and then bounce off towards the highs. I was targeting these highs. It did not happen. Instead, what we had is that we had a demand area on the 1 hour time frame, right, as we can see over there. Nice demand area. I thought we'd sweep this as well, but we didn't. And yeah, price just moved off without us. On the 4 hour time frame, right, we also saw that there's liquidity, right? So we had that, and then obviously that is aligning with our setups, and it happened that it left us behind. This week I'm looking at AUDCAD, a similar setup to AUD/USD. Hopefully it's going to come back and tag us in, right? So as we can see, we've got I drew this out already. Let me just remove that. So for this one, I'm probably gonna have 2 entries as well, but we'll see. So we've got a high, lower, high, low. Sorry, got a lower high, lower low, break of structure, and now we've got a high sitting over there. So what are we expecting? We're expecting price to come down into here and give us a higher high, right? This is resting liquidity sitting below the these lows over here. Demand, as we can see from this wick to this wick over here, the low of the wick. Now if we zoom in, what do we see on the 1 hour time frame? The same thing as we saw on AUD/USD, right? Same thing we saw on AUD/USD. We've got demand situated over here. However, I can't be taking this entire area as the demand area or as my entire order with my entry over here and my stop over here. The risk reward will not be enough, or it won't align to what I'm actually trading, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my first entry over here, right? I'm going to go half risk on each entry. First entry sitting over here, right? And then obviously I'll target the highs, but I'm also understanding that it might not get there. So what I'll do is I'm going to have the second entry, right? So that's 0.5 sitting over here, right? What does that look like for us? So stop is over there, entries over there. This is easily a 1:3, right? The second one, if it does get to the extremes, we've got a 1:6. We shall see, but I'm more comfortable taking the 1:3, knowing that okay, I might be tagged in, and then we'll take it from there. What else am I looking at right now? I'm looking at Nikkei 225, sorry, the Japanese index, which is J225 as well. We've been looking at this for the past 2 weeks, trying to follow it and seeing if we can get a buy towards the upside once we break structure. All right, so as we can see, we are currently situated within this range still, right? So we called the bottom over here around before this movement happened. This was 29th of July. If you can check the previous episodes, we called the bottom over here. Didn't get into this trade. I wanted to see some confirmation first before I actually commit to this trade. So if we jump down to the 4 hour time frame, right? But before we jump down, sorry about that, I just want to clear up as to why we saw buys from there, right? We've been creating internal structure towards the downside, right? Lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, right? Liquidity sweep into this demand area, and now we're seeing buys towards the upside. So this is currently resting liquidity that's sitting over here that I'm looking to take in the long run, right? Weekly also does look convincing, right? We could be heading up to these highs. So if we jump straight down to the 4 hour time frame, what does it look like on the 4 hour time frame? 4 hour time frame. So when we got that bounce the first time, what happened? We got the bounce, right? broke structure towards the upside. We had demand area sitting over there. Inefficiency, we had price react off that area, and then now we're heading for the highs again, right? Why did I not buy from here? Well, I wanted to see liquidity being swept before buying, right? So if price was moving in this manner, then take those lows. Probably would have had an entry holding buys, but it did not happen, so my setup was not there yet. So I'm not taking a trade until I see my setup. So this week, what am I looking out for this week? This week I'm looking for some liquidity to be taken, right? Maybe these lows, right, have price move back down here, and then we can go up to the upside, or price could just continue breaking up over there. Then we can create some structures, right, engineer some liquidity. If that happens, that's also fine. I'm just going to trade what I see at the moment and then continue with it towards the upside. Okay, but nonetheless, we're just waiting for now for the market to show us something that aligns with our setup, right? This is supposed to be on this high. Sorry, I've got an alert set over there. So once we break these highs, then I know, okay, I need to be looking for entries towards the upside. Would I be comfortable looking for buys over here? No, not yet, because obviously now we've reached an area of resistance. You don't want to buy resistance. It's either it breaks above resistance, makes it a support, and then we can start looking for entries towards the upside. But buying over here does not look really safe. So we'd rather wait for the market to come back down into this demand area over here. So we can see similar demand to the other markets that we're looking at: AUDCAD, AUD-USD, and EURUSD. So sitting over there, buying from there, sweep this liquidity low, and then go along with this market, right? And last but not least, we've got EURUSD. EURUSD hasn't changed much. Last week we were actually looking for entries, but it did not give us our setup. It did not come below these lows. It just continued towards the upside, right? Also, this doesn't necessarily mean that the eurozone is actually gaining strength. It's just that there's a bit of dollar weakness now that the war is being de-escalated, right? So not much people or investors are pumping money into the dollar, as it's no longer a safe, no longer, but there's a risk on and a risk off sentiment in the markets right now, right? It's currently risk on, because obviously, like I said, it's de-escalating the war in the Middle East. So what do we hope to find this week? Again, if we're breaking down the dollar from the daily time frame, we are still in the downtrend, right? Still in the downtrend. We've got a low over here, lower high, break of structure. That's a lower low. We've seen the price play at these levels. There was no sweep, so there was no reason for us to be looking for longs all the way to the top, unless it had given us a sweep like that. Then we'd be looking for longs back up again. That hasn't happened. What are we getting right now? We're getting a pullback, right? We're seeing two different structures. On the high time frame, it is still trending down, bearish, right? And on the 4-hour time frame, we are seeing internal structure that is bullish, right? So we are seeing something like that. Reason being, it could be that we are only targeting these highs over here, this internal liquidity, right, sitting over here above these highs. This week we could take these highs out, all right, continue and sell from over here, this point of interest. This is the only area where I'm looking to sell EURUSD once we take out these highs. It aligns with my setup as well, my strategy and everything. As you can see, internal liquidity, a break of structure, pull back into a point of interest, and then we'll be selling off over here. Obviously, I'll be selling from the daily time frame. I'll be waiting for a structure shift on the 4-hour time frame. But for now, on the 4-hour time frame, trading what we're seeing, we're currently situated in a supply area on the 4-hour time frame that I did note last week, as of last week, that we could be getting a reaction off this supply area that we are currently sitting at right now. If we get a push down towards the downside, I'm going to actually let this market move down until we break structure below here. and then I'll be committed to actually looking for sales continuing towards the downside. Anything within this range still, if we're having breakout over here, I won't be looking for sales. I'm not convinced yet that yes, we are continuing towards the downside, unless obviously tensions in the Middle East also escalate even further. Then possibly I would be actually looking for sales once we break that structure. Right, so that is it for now for Euro USD. Not looking into it that much. We can also see this on DXY as well. Let's see. Right, we've got a huge push towards the downside in the dollar index. We could be sweeping these lows over here before we actually continue towards the upside again. Right, I'm not really following this pair. Right, I'm just trading what I see at the moment and what aligns with my setup. But nonetheless, I'll have a look into this week and see what else aligns with my setups, and then if I have anything new or fresh, I will jump on the video and record for you guys. Nonetheless, have a great trading week.